In the last lesson, we went through and factored trinomials that were in this form. So it looked like this. Here's an example if they have like x squared plus 7x plus 12. We'd go through and factor that. So if you remember, you look for a common factor, and there isn't one. Our next strategy was do two sets of parentheses, and just think backwards. I know that when I times those two together, to get x squared, it'd have to be an x and an x. When I multiply these two together, it'd have to get 12. So we take 12 off the side, make a list of pairs of factors that equal 12. So we got 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And any one of those work for the 12. Our next step then is to see which one of those add up to be your middle term. So which add up to be the 7x, and that's the 3 and the 4, right? 3 plus 4. So it ends up being x plus 3 times x plus 4. Right? So we look for the pairs of factors that you can multiply to get the last number that add up to be the middle number, and that's how we find those two. Right? And if I multiply that back out, you can see how we get the answer, right? We get x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 12. So you can see the 3 and the 4 give us the 12. The x and the x give us the x squared. And then the outside, the 4 times x, and the inside, the 3 times x, right? The 3 and the 4 add up to give us the 7x in the middle. Okay, so that's our factored form right there. And we did great at that. We're going to shift gears just a little bit, and we're going to look at quadratic trinomials like this one, right? Remember, quadratic, the highest power is a 2. Trinomials is it has 3 terms. We're going to look at quadratic trinomials that have a number in front. So I don't know if you noticed in those examples you did, but every single problem we did, there wasn't a number in front of the x squared. Well, there really is a number, right? The leading coefficient is 1 on all those problems. So we're going to look at problems where the leading coefficient is not 1. Here is a quick example. So we want to factor 5x squared plus 15x plus 10. So you notice that leading coefficient is not 1, it's a 5. So there's two approaches to these types of problems. The first one is to check for a common factor. So that's what I'm going to do first, and it works on this one. So if I look at this, I've got, let's see, 5x squared, 15x, and 10. 5 goes into all of those. So I'm going to take out a 5. That leaves me with x squared plus 3x plus 2. And now when I'm done, if you look at this inside part, this is now a quadratic trinomial, and now my leading coefficient right there is 1, right? There's nothing in front of the x squared. So now I can use the same method we just did up above to factor that. So what do we times together to get x squared? X and x. What do we multiply together to get 2? 2 and 1. And do they add up to be 3? Yep. So we're good. It's all factored. Now notice how I dropped the 5 down. So there's 3 factors in this problem. I have a factor of 5, a factor of x plus 2, and a factor of x plus 1. And if I were to multiply that all out, I get the answer. Let me just show you that really quick. And when you have 3 different factors, you need to multiply 2 at a time. So for example, I'll do a different color, but we could take the 5 and the x plus 2 and just multiply those together. So if I do, I'd get 5x, right? 5x plus 10. Okay, and I get my answer, and then I take that answer and I multiply it by the third factor. And again, I'm just going to multiply this out. So I get 5x squared plus 5x plus 10x plus 10. Add those two middle terms together, and we end up with what we started with. So that's our first strategy, is if you get a quadratic trinomial that has a leading coefficient other than 1, right? I've got that 5 right there. One thing you can try is taking out a common factor, and if you can take one out and then your leading coefficient is 1, then it's just one of those really easy, right? There's just a 1 there. It's just one of those really easy problems then that we've already done. Now let's compare that problem to this one I have over here, this 5x squared plus 17x plus 6. This was not in your notes, so if you want to go ahead and add that. All right, but if we compare these two, if I try that same strategy, it's got a 5 in front, but there is no common factor, right? I have 5x squared and 17x and 6. There's nothing in common between all 3 factors, so I cannot take out a common factor. If that's the case, then I cannot proceed the same way as we did before. I can't say what are the factors of 6 to add up to be 17. There aren't any, right? 1 and 6, right? If I take 6 up here, let me just get that, sorry. I take 6 up there. Could be 1 and 6 or 2 and 3, right? They don't add up to be 17. That does not mean that this does not factor. It can still factor. And the reason why is because this 5 in front changes things. So what we're going to do is we're going to proceed. If it's a quadratic trinomial, which it is, quadratic, the highest power is 2, trinomial because it's got 3 terms, then I'm still going to proceed the same way that I'm going to do my 2 sets of parentheses. And I'm still just thinking backwards. I know that times that has to give me the 5x squared. Well, let's see. What can I times to get 5x squared? So it could be a 5x and an x, right? I know that this times this has to give me 6. And I made my list up here. That means it's either got to be a 1 and a 6 or a 2 and a 3. But I don't know which one. None of those add up to be 17, and they won't. So this method is called guess and check because I have all of my possible outcomes. I know it could be a 5x. I know it has to be a 5x and an x, and it could be a 1 and a 6 or a 2 and a 3. And you can actually reverse those factors too. So it could put a 1 and a 6 here, or a 6 and a 1, or a 2 and a 3, or a 3 and a 2. So I have 4 possible outcomes. It's really hard to tell which one's going to work just by looking at it. So what I do is I just make a guess. Like I could try the 1 and the 6, and I'm just going to try it and see if it works. So I'm going to go plus 1 plus 6. Well, the way I'm going to check to see if it works is just by multiplying it out. So I'm going to take, right, I'm going to go 5x times x, and that would give me 5x squared. Now we already knew that. When I put the 5x and x there, I knew I was going to get a 5x squared. I'm going to go 5x times 6. That gives me a 30x. I'm going to go 1 times x, gives me a 1x, 1 times 6. All right, so I end up with 5x squared plus 31x plus 6. Well, I got the 5x squared, right? We knew that was going to happen when I put the 5x and the x there. And I got the 6. I knew that was going to happen because I put 1 and 6 here. The question was, did I get the right middle term? And if I look up here, I did not. I wanted a 17 and I got a 31. Okay, so I know that 1 and 6 don't work. What I'm going to do is go back up here and try it again. Only this time, I'm going to put, I'm going to switch the 1 and the 6. So I'm going to flip them around. I'm going to go plus 6 plus 1. We're going to try it that way. Okay. I'm not going to times out the 5x times x every time, right? That's 5x squared. And the 6 times 1 is a 6. The 2 middle terms come from multiplying the outside 2 and the inside 2. So 5x times 1 is 5x. And 6 times x is a positive 6x. So they add up to be 11x. That is not what I want. I want a 17. So that means 1 and 6 cannot work. I tried it both ways. All right, let's go back up then. Let's try the 2 and the 3. So we're going to come back up here, plug in the 2 and the 3. So let's try it this way. All right. And again, I'm not going to worry about the 5 times x or the 2 times 3. All I really worry about is the outside 2. That's 15x. And the inside 2, which is 2x. 15x plus 2x is 17x. There is my factored form. So my answer, my factored form, comes out to be 5x plus 2 times x plus 3. Now, if that hadn't have worked, I would have taken the 3 and the 2 and just switched them around. So this method, again, is often referred to as, this is what I call it anyway, guess and check. And now when I say guess, we're going to make it an educated guess. And it turns out the more of these you do, the better you get at it. But I'm going to start out with this framework, right? Quadratic trinomial. I know it's got to be a 5x and an x. To get a 6, I'm going to list my possibilities. And then I'm just trying different combinations until I find the one that gives me, this is the important one, I find the one that gives me that 17x in the middle. Okay, that's what we're focused on. It takes a little bit of practice, and once you practice it, most of us get really good at this. All right, let's show you another example down here. Here's a couple of them. So let's start with this first one. I got 4x squared plus 13x plus 3. Sorry. So let's start out. This is a quadratic trinomial, right? Highest power is a 2. It's got 3 terms. There's no common factor. So if there's no common factor and it's a quadratic trinomial, I'm always going to start with my 2 sets of parentheses. Okay, now we got to think backwards. That's all we're doing. I know this times this gives me 4x squared. There's actually 2 possibilities here. It could be a 4x and an x, but there's another one. It could also be a 2x and a 2x, and we don't really know. We have no way of knowing which one of these it's going to be. All right, when I multiply the last two, either here or here or here or here, I got to get 3. That's kind of nice because with 1 and 3, we only have one combination there, right? All right, so now we just start plugging it in. I don't want to get it the first. I think I see which one's going to work, but I don't want to get it the first time. So let's try it here. I'm going to put in the plus 3 and the plus 1. And I don't have to multiply the whole thing out. I know that 4x times x gives me the 4x squared. I know that 3 times 1 gives me the 3. I'm really just interested in that middle term right there. So to get it, it's always the outside 2. That would be 4x plus the inside 2. That would be 3x. I add those together. That's 7. Not what we wanted. So don't give up on the 1 and the 3. We need to try it the other way. So let's do that. So I'm going to put the 1 here and the 3 here and try it again. Okay, that would be 12x. That would be 1x. I add those together. I got it. That's 13x, right? So my factored form is 4x plus 1 times x plus 3. Now, if that hadn't have worked, I would have come down to this second one, right, with the 2x and the 2x and tried it down there. So that's all you're doing. You're just trying combinations until you find the one that gives you, remember, I'm focused on this. I'm going until I find the one that gives you that middle term right there. Let's try this next one. I got 3x squared minus 7x plus 2. Okay, so just thinking backwards here. First of all, there's no common factor. So next set, it is a quadratic trinomial. So what do we times together to get 3x squared? What do we times together to get 2? This one's pretty simple because I only have one possibility to get 2 and one possibility to get 3x squared. So basically, I just have to figure out, is it going to be the 1 here, the 2 here, or I need to flip them around? One other thing is when I times these, I get a positive 2. But when I add it up, I get a negative. So I actually want both of these to be negative. We talked about that in the last lesson, right? When I multiply them, I get a positive. All right, let's try this one. I'm going to go minus 1, minus 2. Try it out. Times the outside 2. Be a minus 6x times the inside 2, minus 1x. I combine those two. I got it, right? Got that minus 7x right there. So that's my factored form. All right, so my answer is 3x minus 1 times x minus 2. Now again, that was a pretty simple one because there wasn't a lot of combinations. You'll get to some of these problems where there are a lot of combinations, and then it starts to get a little bit trickier. I want you guys to try this one right here. So pause the video, factor 2x squared minus 5x minus 7, then come back and we'll go through it together. You can check your work. All right, so it's a quadratic trinomial. There's no common factor, so I do my 2 sets of parentheses, 2x and x. When you multiply the last two, you get a negative 7. Be careful with signs. To get a negative 7, I have to have opposites. So it could either be 1 and negative 7, or I guess it could be negative 1 and positive 7. And we're not sure which one yet. So I'm going to go plus 1, minus 7, and try it. All right, to check it, you times the outside 2. That's minus 14x. The inside 2 plus 1x. I add those. I do not get a minus 5. So let's take the 1 and the 7 and switch them around. So let's see. Let's put the 7 here and the 1 here. Okay, so times the outside 2, I'm going to get negative 2x. Times the inside 2, I get plus 7x. Add those together. Now I wanted a minus 5x, and I ended up with a positive 5x. We talked about this also in the last lesson. That's easy to take care of. All I need to do is switch the signs. So I'm going to come back up here, and I'm going to change the 1 to be a plus. Sorry, I forgot which way it was before. The 7 to be a minus. Okay, now when I multiply them, 2x times 1 is a positive 2x. Then I go minus 7 times x is a minus 7x. And now when I add them together, so minus 7x, and now I combine them together, I end up with negative 5x. That's the combination we want. So there's my factored form. 2x minus 7 times x plus 1. That's what it comes out to. Okay. Let's try this next one, because this next one has a lot more combinations. all the ones we've done up until now, there haven't really, you've only had 2 to 4 options. This one's going to have a whole bunch more. So I want to show you one of those examples. Hold on just a second. Don't know if the screen went out on you there, but it did on me. Okay, now we're back. All right, so we're going to go 7a squared minus 43a plus 40. So again, check for a common factor. There's not one. So next step, hey, it's a quadratic trinomial, so it's got to be these 2 sets of parentheses. It's the only way they factor. To get 7a squared, that's not bad. It's got to just be 7a and a. Now I time the last 2 numbers, I get 40. But when I add them up, my middle number comes out to be a negative 43. That means I have to have 2 negatives. Well, and here's the other thing is 40 has a lot of options. So negative 1 and negative 40, negative 2 and negative 20. 3 doesn't go into it, 4 and 10, 5 and 8, 6 doesn't go into it, negative 8. 6 doesn't go into it, 7 doesn't go into it, then we're back to 8, and we already have 8 covered. So there's all my list of factors. And you can write either of those both ways. So that's a lot of combinations, right? I have 1 and 40 or 40 and 1, 2 and 20 or 20 and 2. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's really 8 combinations here. This is where we want to start like thinking about what's going to happen. This isn't always easy, but here's an example. I know if I put the 40 over here, I'll end up having to go 7 times 40. That's going to be way too big. I could try the 40 here. I could go minus 40 and minus 1. That would be minus 7 and minus 40. That's minus 47. That was somewhat close, but that didn't work. So you can kind of think ahead before you actually plug them in and see if you think they'll work. But I know that one's not going to. So I know those are crossed off. We could try 2 and 20. I don't know. Let's see if they work. So that would be, that's way too big. That's like 120. I should have seen that ahead of time. We'll switch them around, though. So let's go 20 and 2. So that would be minus 14a. That would be minus 20a. That's minus 34. Close, but no cigar. So we tried it both ways. Didn't work. I'm going to cross that off my list. Negative 4 and 10. I'm not going to put the 10 here because that'd be 7 times 10 would be 70. It'd be way too big. But let's try it over here. 10 and 4. That'd be minus 28a. That would be minus 10a. Yeah, it's somewhat close. That's minus 38, but still not what I wanted. And the 10's not going to work on the other side. So I'm going to take that, cross it off my list. All right, so we're down to minus 5 and 8. Hopefully this works. Let's try, better not be the very last one we try. That would be extremely bad luck. So minus 5, minus 8 times this. That's minus 56 and minus 5. That's too big, right? I should say too small because they're negative. Let's switch them around. We'll put the 8 over here, the 5 over here. That's minus 35a. That one's minus 8a. Minus 35 minus a is a minus 43. So the very last one we tried gave us the factored form. So a couple things, like you can look a lot of times and you can eliminate some of the options. Like I knew the 40 and the 20, even the 10 was not going to work over here because when I times it by the 7, it was going to be too big. So when we call this one guess and check, we really want it to be like an educated. So think about the problem, what do I think is going to work? And try those numbers first, okay, before, otherwise it can be pretty frustrating, trying all those different combinations. Here's one that's a little bit different, so make sure you follow this one with me. What makes it different is that negative out in front. It turns out that quadratic trinomials, you can factor them with a negative out in front, but it becomes really hard. So just a suggestion, if you ever have a negative in front, we talked about factoring out a negative when we took out common factors. This one does not have a common factor, but what I can always do is I can take out a negative 1. If I take out a negative 1, all it does is flip all the signs. And now my first term is positive, and that makes it a lot easier to factor. So now the negative is just going to stay out in front. Let's do our 2 sets of parentheses. To get 4x squared, it could be 4x and x, but it could also be 2x and 2x. To get negative 5, that one's kind of nice because it's just going to be negative 1 and 5. It's not like that last problem where we had 40, that had a whole bunch. But I could put the 1 and the 5 here, or the 5 and the 1, or the 1 and the 5, or the 5 and the 1. So I think we end up with 4 different combinations we're going to try. Remember what I'm trying to get. I'm focused on that positive 8x right there. Okay, so let's try one. If I put the 5 over here, I'm going to have 4 times 5 is 20. I don't think that's going to work. So that might be like the last one I try, but let's try putting the 5 here. See if that works. So times the outside 2 and the inside 2. When I do that, I end up with what? Minus 4x plus 5x. That does not add up to be what we want. And if I put the 5 on the other side, it's definitely not going to work. So 5 times 4 is 20. I want to get 8. Yeah, so I'm going to come down here and try it at the bottom. Now, the nice thing about the 2x and the 2x is I don't have to try it both ways, right? Because the 2x's are the same, it doesn't matter if I switch the minus 1 to the 5, I'll get the same thing. So let's try it. That's 10x minus 2x. That gives me a positive 8x, which is what I want, right? And that problem right there, that's a positive 8x. Now remember, if I got the wrong thing, I would switch the plus and the minus. Okay, so my final one, don't forget about this factor up here. I'm going to put that negative 1 out in front, or a negative out in front. I have 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 5. So if you ever do have a negative in front, factor out a negative before you try going through the whole factoring process. So you can see these are a little bit tricky. They take some getting used to, but usually we do pretty good with them by the end. Just to kind of summarize here, when you're going to factor quadratic trinomials, the very first thing we should always do, so make sure you highlight this in your notes here. The very first thing we should always do is check for a greatest common factor. Always. Okay. After we take out the common factor, then we have to decide, does a equal to 1, right? Is it in the form like we did on the last lesson, the x squared plus bx plus c? If it is, then we're just taking the factors of c to add up to be b. It's the really quick, easy ones. If a does not equal 1, like we've been doing today, then I've got to do that guess and check process. So let's try these. Let's start with this one, 3x squared minus 8x plus 24. So is there a common factor? Always do that first. And there is, right? I can take out a 3. So if I take out a 3, I'll do it off this side over here. If I take out a 3, I'm left with x squared minus 6x plus 8. Okay, now look at my x squared term, my quadratic term. There's nothing in front of it. So now it's one of these guys over here, which hopefully makes you smile, because that means these are going to be easier. Okay, and now all I do is, what are the factors of c of 8 that add up to be negative 6? Let's do our 2 sets of parentheses. I know it's an x and an x. 8. Now, to get a positive 8, it's got to be 2 negatives, because it has to add up to be a negative. So it could be negative 1 and negative 8, or negative 2 and negative 4. That one adds up to be negative 6. So it's x minus 2, x minus 4. It's one of those really quick, easy ones. Again, the reason why it was easy is because a was equal to 1. There is nothing in front of the x squared. Okay, let's try this next one. So look at the 3x squared plus 22x minus 16. It looks kind of similar, but in this case, 3 won't come out of all of them. So since it won't come out, now I've got to come over here, right? So if a is equal to 1, right? If a is equal to 1 right there, then it's one of the quick, easy ones. This one is not. So the 3x squared plus 22x minus 16, we're going to put over here, and I've got to do that guess and check. So let's do one more example. 3x and x, right, to get 3x squared. What can we do to get negative 16? Got to have opposite signs. Negative 1 and 16, negative 2 and 4. 3 doesn't go into it. Negative 4 and 4. All right, let's see if we can nail this down. If I put this 8 here, if I put the 16 here, you have 3 times 16. That's like 48. And even putting the minus 2 there, I don't think I'm going to get that 22. We could maybe switch them around, but I don't think that one looks unlikely to work to me. So I'm not going to start with it. I'm going to start with the minus 2 and 8 or the 4 and 4. So let's start with the minus 2 and 8. And I think I may have gotten lucky. I really didn't know this was going to work. But when I times the outside 2 to check it, that's 24x. And the inside 2 is minus 2x. That gives me 22. Usually doesn't happen that fast, right? Usually we have to try some different combinations. I got lucky with my first guess there. Okay, so in your factoring quadratic trinomials, check for if it's got a number out in front, right? If it's got a out in front, you're going to check first to see if there's a common factor. If there is, you take it out, and then if there's nothing in front of the x squared, it's one of the quick, easy ones we've already done. If it doesn't come out, then you're going to have to do this guess and check process, which I think is fun. Like you get to just it's really just solving a puzzle there. You're just figuring out the right combinations that make it work. Okay, that's all I got for you. Thanks, guys.